Good evening, everyone. Deputy Executive Dean, Professor Kath Gelber and other dignitaries, students, colleagues and distinguished guests. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the 2025 Carolyn D. Baker Lecture. My name is Marnie Shea and I have the privilege of serving as the Deputy Head of School in UQ's School of Education, a leading centre of educational research in Queensland, Australia and beyond. I would now like to invite my colleague, Kate McClay, to deliver the Acknowledgement of Country.
On behalf of the School of Education and all of you, our guests here this evening, I'd like to acknowledge country. We pay our respects to the traditional custodians of these lands, the Yagara and the Turrbal people, and to their ancestors and descendants, from whose care for country over millennia we all continue to benefit. We also acknowledge and pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues, students, supporters and friends who are present tonight. The lands that we are gathered on this evening were places of teaching, learning and research long before the university's conception. Sovereignty was never ceded, and this always was and will always be Aboriginal land.
Thank you, Kate. Tonight's lecture celebrates and commemorates the life and legacy of Associate Professor Carolyn D. Baker. Carolyn moved from Canada to Australia in 1976 and joined UQ in 1991 as an Associate Professor in the School of Education. During her time here, she served on academic board, as a Director of Research and as Director of Postgraduate Studies. An accomplished researcher on language education, Carolyn supervised 25 PhD and MPhil candidates to graduation and received a University Teaching Award in recognition of her excellence. She strongly believed in supporting students to share their work in the wider academic community and was instrumental in initiating the school's postgraduate research conference, which continues to thrive today. Her legacy lives on in the success of her students, her colleagues, and in the ongoing influence of her research. In preparing for this evening's lecture, I've had the pleasure of connecting with Carolyn's colleagues, friends and family who remember her with great warmth. We are also grateful to be able to share a letter from her son, John Baker, who has kindly written to the prize recipients in her honour. The C.D. Baker Lecture has become a cornerstone of the school's research culture and is proudly part of UQ's Research and Innovation Week. This year marks the 21st anniversary of the lecture, a testament to Carolyn's enduring impact on our school and beyond. As the concluding event in the Research Week program, tonight is both a celebration of Carolyn's legacy and an opportunity to engage with cutting-edge research through our distinguished guest speaker. It is now my pleasure to invite Director of Research, Associate Professor Liz Edwards, to formally introduce this evening's keynote speaker. Thank you.
Thanks, Marnie. Good evening, colleagues, students and guests. So it's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed speaker, Dr. Kevin Runyons, who will present on school mental health, the power and potential of teachers to make a difference. Dr. Runyons is an internationally recognised researcher in child social and emotional development and a consultant in school mental health. He's an adjunct professor at McMaster University in Ontario and an honorary research associate with the Kids Research Institute Australia in Perth. And he was previously the head of schools and community wellbeing team at the Telethon Kids Institute in Perth. I have a little moment to tell you here that when I invited Kevin, I thought he was still in Perth. He wrote back and said, actually Liz, I now live in Canada, and our fabulous head of school was happy to still support his journey. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Dr. Runyons has authored over 60 peer-reviewed publications and conducted one of the most cited meta-analyses on bullying and cyberbullying. His advice has been sought by governments in both Australia and Canada on strategic policy and implementation, and he also contributes to several prominent academic journals and scholarly boards. Tonight's lecture couldn't be more timely. Youth mental health has been declining globally over the past 2 decades, and schools where young people spend much of their time play a critical role in promoting well-being. Dr. Runyon will explore how educators and school leaders can harness teacher-student relationship quality, classroom mental health literacy, and reciprocal well-being to foster supportive, resilient school communities. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Kevin Runyon.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin. You can just call me Kevin. That's great. Imagine I'm wearing a jacket and a tie, and I just took them off because I'm Canadian, and you might not find it warm in here, but I do. So thank you all for coming out. I really appreciate it. So I just wanted to have us start with a couple minutes of silent meditation. If you all just close your eyes and... No, I'm not going to do that to you, but it's going to become relevant why I would do that at all at the start in a moment here. So of course, it's the wrong setting. So a little minor tweaks here. So I'm going to start with this overall question of like, should educators be trying to teach mental health in their classrooms? Because it's actually become more controversial lately in a way that we'll look at. And then I'm going to move into talking about tiers of support at school, which might be new to some and not to others. I'm going to talk a little bit about why kids may not look to teachers for help as much as we would hope they do. Move into talking about social-emotional learning at schools as one option. Teacher-student relationship quality is going to come in and out there, and some thoughts about getting there from where we are at the moment. So, all right, so something like that. So it's been well established. There's a lot of, I think, agreement that at this point, educators are the sorts of people who are really well positioned to help kids with not just their reading and writing and all those lovely things, but their well-being and their mental health. And the World Health Organization has been pretty clear about this health promotion potential that schools have. Of course, they're the one universal, almost all kids go to school. There are some who don't, yes, who are homeschooled. But it's a universal setting that has a lot of potential to do a lot more than what we currently think it does in most cases. So that's sort of the starting point. But then the question becomes how? How should educators be best supporting children's mental health? So I was intrigued. My friend and colleague Tracy Vaillancourt at Ottawa U sent me an article from The Guardian right after School Mental Health Ontario, with whom I was consulting, had launched their mental health literacy lessons. Ontario government made it mandatory for grades 7 and 8. We'd written the curricula for it. And then Lucy Foulkes from the UK writes this op-ed based on some work she's been doing, saying mental health lessons in schools sound like a great idea. The trouble is they don't work. And it's like, oh, whoops, oh dear, we've just invested a lot of money in that sort of thing. Oh dear. Anyway, and so part of what I'm going to be doing today is having an argument with Lucy Foulkes in front of you. Okay, Lucy Foulkes isn't here. Is anyone, if you've worked with Lucy, I just want to know who I've got in the audience here. But okay, so a quote then: when it comes to all class lessons, we should listen to the evidence. Given the evidence, we should now stop doing these lessons. It's like, oh, that's pretty unequivocal, okay? But I really do want to look at this question of, is there really no evidence that educators can do stuff in their classes that benefits students, like benefits all students, delivered to all students, that benefits them? Or is Lucy really quite right and we need to just stop and put it all into the school psychologists and so on? So picking up again on her sorts of quotes, students say that these lessons make them focus on negative feelings and memories, which then upsets them. Okay, so that doesn't sound great. I would sort of start arguing things like mindfulness. Is mindfulness, if you're 12 years old, okay, okay, full disclosure, when I was in grade 6, we had a teacher who thought it would be great if we all journaled, write in a journal for 15 minutes or whatever in your day. And I can guarantee you that at no point did that process elicit self-reflection on my part. I was just like, what video game JJ Denis had got, and would I be able to play it that weekend? And it literally was just this remarkable waste of time. mindfulness is the sort of thing you're going to sit there in class, and even with the best instructor, it's going to be a tricky one to expect children to really engage in that in the way that we might. I mean, put up your hand if you do any mindfulness or meditation activities yourselves. Like, you know, and I think the people who've tried doing it, they know, like, it's actually something you have to really want to do for it to have any, or else your mind's just going in a circle. So the studies that Lucy's work had drawn on, one of them was a mindfulness curriculum that had been set up. Another was e-mental health curriculum that was set up. And I had some notes that I can't actually see that told me the name of the person at UQ who was part of that other study. And does that ring a bell? Are any of you that person who was involved in the study of mental health lessons? No, okay. Okay, I can rest easy now. I have a drink of water. You know, and it's tricky. Doing any kind of research around this stuff is tricky because just like doing research around bullying, which, yeah, I've done with Marilyn Campbell here in the past, you can teach kids concepts that make them have a little light bulb moment where they're like, oh, that's what's been happening to me, right? Oh, that's what I'm feeling. And then you get this paradoxical increase in symptoms after the intervention's been delivered, which makes it look like you're creating a problem when potentially you're just giving people the tools to think about their lives in a way that makes them see, oh, actually, this is what I've been experiencing that I haven't been able to put my finger on. So these are just a couple of concerns I have about Lucy's conclusions overall. And then also, like in the studies, teachers do, like a lot of teachers are already really trying to do their best to support kids as a whole child, their social lives, their emotional lives. They're doing stuff. And so in forcing an intervention set of schools to do a study, you're going to teach this now. Maybe you're taking away from really great stuff that they would be doing otherwise, because a lot of school teachers are already doing those things. But I don't want to dwell too much on it. But still, using Lucy as a springboard here, she's saying, you know, so if you're seeing kids who have an increase in mental health symptoms, right, as a result of perhaps of the intervention, that should never be the end point, right? Because you would hope that schools have services in place to help those kids. Right? And so we're getting into then, you know, is there a question for determining who needs support, okay, and when they need support? And so then we're getting into the world of what some people call multi-tiered systems of support. Just quick hands up if you know about multi-tiered systems of support already. Okay, enough that I can continue talking about it. Okay. So really what we're talking about then is just this sort of classic public health sort of model where there's stuff at tier 1 that's given to everybody in society, and then there's stuff at tier 2, which is for people who are at higher risk of something, and then, you know, the intensive supports, and obviously the triangle is intentionally designed with the point going up because you're getting into fewer kids who need it. So reflecting that scope of what's required. And then, so then you have, you know, this idea of there are different roles at the school who could be helping out in different ways. And so doing tier 1 mental health lessons is part of, hopefully, ideally, a package of things that a school or a school district is doing, including having student support personnel who know what they're doing, right? And having regulated mental health professionals who are there to catch the kids with the greatest need. And I'll just do it like this. And not just to be doing assessments, you know, of IQ all the time, like where they actually can use all of their skills and provide, you know, therapy, and hopefully not always putting out fires, but I think that's a funding issue. Anyone here responsible for the funding of education in the state? Really? None? Okay. I guess I'll continue anyway. Okay. And so, you know, and this is just fleshing it out a little bit more, this idea of like how this works, and I don't need to say much more about that. And then, you know, the question then becomes, there's a lot, I could talk a lot longer about some of this stuff. If you don't have some kind of universal sense, like getting some sense of the kids and where they're at, how do you know which kids need support unless you're relying on people to just sort of get it? You know, oh, I think that kid needs support. Now, that could be great, but there's a lot of kids who know how to mask Just like maybe if you've ever experienced some mental health problems, you can still, put the game face on and go out and be fine. And kids are able to do that too. So there's kids who can slip through the cracks, but that's not the focus I want to have here. Just want to prioritize that there's some measurement helps, right? Having some data helps, and I hope that doesn't sound too neoliberal of me or something like that, technocratic, but okay. And then of course, you're not alone, right? The schools are then able to, one would hope, have a clear pathway of referral. I'm seeing someone kind of going, yeah, to community child and adolescent mental health services. And then, this important question of the return to school needs to be well planned out. And I'm not going to dwell on this, but I think this is the model that we're looking for as a society. Ideally, you would have, probably within the school, you would have Department of Health people working alongside the Tier 3, like liaisons within the school system itself, who know how to make those connections to community CAMs. That might require a level of funding that is currently not the case. But anyway, so that's, this is something I think we can aspire to. Now, going back to the purpose of the talk then, talking about Tier 1 classroom interventions, I mean, sure, and there are other studies that show that mindfulness helps some students. I'm not saying that no studies have ever shown that. Lucy Folks seems to believe that there aren't anyway. But anyway, so there are approaches there, and those are the two that Lucy had talked about. But there's also, there's coping-focused interventions that could happen in school. There's positive behavior intervention and support, which is often focused on behavior, but has evidence showing that it can help mental health issues in other domains as well. There's mental health literacy, which I think I said I was going to be talking about a lot, but I'm not actually, as it happens. And then, this broader kind of social emotional learning sort of approach, which I am going to talk about a fair bit more. Okay. So one of the problems, though, is that students don't turn to teachers for help. And I want to do an important digression, I guess, into thinking about this a little bit more. So this is Australian data. This was Brennan Mission Australia funded work that they do. Their big surveys, students who are over a certain cutoff on distress or not, and who they turn to. And you can see, down here, just at the tail end, right? You've got your teachers and your school counselors, and that's a worry, right? Like you would hope that that's not the case. But why would that be the case? And so it's a little early, but I just want a quick stretch break here. Everyone, it's getting, So if you want, just like stand up, everyone stand. No, you don't have to stand up. Stand up and do this. Okay, stand up and do this for a while. Now this is, I raised this meaningfully. Thank you, there, someone's doing it, right? But hold it, now hold it for a minute, silently. Because this was my son's introduction to primary school, was a teacher who had them doing this in Perth, Australia. And he hated it because he's got a little bit of his dad's ADHD, let's just say. And it really didn't work for him to be doing this, and he resented the teacher for introducing it. And I'm just going to put, there's just a kind of striking graphic similarity there that I thought it's quite pretty in its own way. But who's school for? Here's my family, here's my mom. Okay, whom does it reward? Is that grammatically right? Anyone know if that's, should I use whom in that sentence? Whom should it? What's school for? I mean, we know what school's for, like schools for reading and writing. We're reminded this all the time by, various governments that come in and want to reprioritize stuff. But I do want to think about my son here, because this literally was us. This is not how we dress in Canada normally. This was a little photo thing when my mom came to visit us in Victoria, British Columbia, and we were all like, it's a place that it's a cowboy thing. It's like, okay, but my son, there was no way he was going to put on a cowboy outfit. He had to be dressed as a knight. And it's like, okay, that's, okay. So school, and not to make it all about my son, bear with me, but we're talking about this kid and those who are like him. Like that's a tough one if you're a teacher who's like, now we're all doing this until I feel like I can resume usual activities, with a kid who's like, No, no, thank you. So I just want to have a little think then about motivation, you know, and it'll come tying around to the bigger picture in a second. But I just want you to think about a hobby, and here I'm kind of going, I really had this written out in my notes, which I'm not looking at right now. They are here printed out. I can do this, but I can do this. I can do this. Put up your hand if you do something that people might call a hobby, or just something that you do outside of work because you enjoy it. Okay, anything? It doesn't have to be called a hobby, it doesn't have to be, but you do it because it relaxes you, you kind of enjoy it. Okay, no, just keep your hands up for a second. Okay, so now, put your hand down if someone forces you to do it. Really? Okay, I'm intrigued now by the people who are like, okay, so keep your hand up if you're voluntarily doing it, right? Okay, now keep your hand up if I had to say to you, like, okay, you need to do it now for 60 minutes. And you're like, yeah, cool, I would do that right now for 60 minutes. Okay, all right. Does it keep your hand up if you feel like it ties you into a broader sort of community of the people who like to do that sort of thing? Okay, anyways, there's a lot of hands still up. And that's my clumsy way of trying to introduce this idea of what they call self-determination theory, which is a weird name. But basically, it just has to do with this. I want to do this. Like, what drives the feeling of I want to do this? And the ideas are that it's something that makes you feel reasonably competent, or like you're getting better at something. Maybe you're not competent yet, but you can see it as part of a pathway. You're learning to play an instrument. You're getting a little bit better. It's something that you are choosing to do. Right? It's pretty rare that you have a hobby that someone forces you to do. I mean, unless you've asked them to, you know, be your external regulator on it. And then usually it's something that connects you up with the world in some way or other. It makes you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. There are a lot of individual hobbies, but if you step back from it, I think you can imagine yourself as part of a grand tradition of people who squirrel away in the basement working on your cabinet or whatever it might be, right? And so these things are pretty well researched now as sort of drivers of what gets called intrinsic motivation that comes from inside the person, as opposed to expectations that are put onto the person from the outside. And that's not to say that you should never put expectations onto someone from the outside. I mean, we have to do that sometimes. There are ways to help people feel like, oh, I can see how this is relevant to my life and how, you know, this is something that could become part of my identity if I learned it better. But I'm going to say, let's be honest, a lot of what we ask at school is not stuff that fits that category very well. My kids are the age now of, you know, doing the calculus units and stuff, and it's kind of like they don't see it, the relevance to their futures, but they have to do it anyway. So that takes a real willpower then to actually focus your energy on that. But anyway, why am I talking about this when I'm talking about what classroom teachers can do? Well, okay. So this was a slide that I tweaked at the last minute, but you never tweak things at the last minute, and so here's what I've got. People who report intrinsic motivation, and I'm actually seeing that the sentence doesn't make a lot of sense there, but this is basically from a meta-analysis linking intrinsic motivation to outcomes. And to the extent that kids, when they're asked about their schooling, are saying like, yeah, this is something that I do actually want to be better. I do want to achieve this for myself, kind of thing. That's linked to better academic performance and effort at school, of course, absenteeism being lower, and then social emotional functioning and enjoyment and satisfaction. So this isn't rocket science. This just makes sense, I presume, at this point. So maybe we can see why the aim would be there. I think I actually hid this next slide, but I'll just be quick. My daughter went to a shiny new high school for a year when we got back from COVID Canada times in Perth. And she, at one point, needed to use the, what you call the toilet, yes? While the class was in session, and was told that no, she wasn't allowed to. And that just struck me as bizarre. And so there's just a little thing. I don't know if anyone knows this movie reference, but I'm not gonna, if you don't know it, you don't know it. If you know it, you know it. I'll just leave it at that. And so I want to think a little bit about teacher and student relationships and power struggles and expectations and how those are approached. Because there's been a lot of research around the closeness of relationships between the felt closeness, right, of the student and teacher's relationship, as opposed to like conflict and as opposed to dependency. You know, if you're an educator, you know students who like, you think they're great, but you still end up arguing with them about stuff constantly. So they're distinct things, but they all kind of are important and interconnected a bit. Now, I want to talk about that because there's a lot of research on how important that might be. And so this is from a meta-analysis linking teacher relationship quality with students to a number of outcomes like behavior, like school belonging, motivation, well-being, et cetera, et cetera. And I've got the effect size up here, which I know is very abstract to most people. So what I've done I did a little work with ChatGPT. Oh, I got to tell you, does anyone here speak French? Okay, so I was in France, and someone was clarifying to me, ChatGPT is literally translates as cat, I've farted. Does that sound right? Anyway, so ChatGPT is taken on a new sort of fondness for me. The farting cat, I call it sometimes. Okay, so what I used it to look up, so tell me something like a physical health thing, risk factor relationship, that's the same as this academic achievement as a function of teacher quality, relationship quality. And it's something like, I think we are all aware that calcium intake is related to women's bone mass, so that's important, right? It's something that people do. The relationship with the lack of behavior problems, to put it that way, is equivalent, apparently equivalent to about the impact of secondhand smoke on lung cancer, which I think most people know is, it's serious. Exercise and heart disease. Oh, okay. Oh, high blood pressure and stroke. Oh, okay. Or actually, the same for the top one is smoking and lung cancer. So it's like, oh, okay, we're talking about like a well-established, meaningful relationship here. So how do we, so there's a big question there of how do we set up schools? Because it's not easy. Like it's now my chance to go put up your hand if you are or have been a classroom educator. Because I'm assuming yeah, right? It's not easy because there's kids like my son out there, and or worse, right, than my son. And teaching is a hard job, right? And it's rewarding, but it's a hard job. And of course, you guys know all this because this is Australian research that I seem to recall hit the news pretty well. The workload and burnout rates and the desire to leave the profession is all very, very high. And having a situation, I mean, if you've ever had a bad relationship with a colleague, you know how hard it makes going into work, right? When you've got that relationship with a student, you know how hard it is to come in and be like, okay, I'm ready to be there for that class and that child today. It's hard, and that sucks. So, all right, so what? So what do we do about it is sort of the so what. And now I'm going to just introduce social emotional learning, which is, again, it's just not rocket science. It's the idea like some kids come to school and they're really well, prepared for the sitting in school and listening and being nice to their peers and all those things. And some of them find it harder. And they genuinely find it harder because they've been exposed to what the scientists call adverse childhood experiences, perhaps, that have not provided them with the self-regulatory capacities to do all the things that we expect from kids as a default thing. So the idea of social emotional learning is that maybe it's a good idea if schools are explicit in helping kids develop these capabilities, because these capabilities undergird your capacity to be a student. So it just seems kind of like I'm in the no-brainer territory on this stuff, but I know that not everyone's perhaps so, feeling that way about it. But maybe this can change some minds if anyone's not convinced. Meta-analysis showed that programs that are aimed at improving students, on average, this is to say programs that are aimed at improving social emotional capabilities, are associated with an 11 percentile gains in its student achievement outcomes, right? So if you don't want to do it for the sake of having lower teacher burnout rates or actually just having students achieve their potential as human beings, it helps their achievement too. So maybe that's swaying, if anyone felt that it wasn't swaying. And then that's separate from the documented sustained positive impacts. I say sustained because there are also now longitudinal studies of the sustained impact, and they're showing that yes, it works and it continues to work for those kids in follow-up in the studies that have been following them up. And then guess what? Teaching social emotional learning in your classroom also helps student-teacher relationship quality. So getting less conflict, getting more closeness, and it's one of those, like, I think we're onto something here that we can work with. So, how much? I have 15 minutes left, do I? So what should work? So educators don't need to be clinicians running therapies in the classroom. That's not the expectation. That's not a reasonable expectation. But there are things that they can be doing that has really good evidence to suggest that it's worth doing. It might not be the 2 studies that Lucy Folks, I'm really laying into Lucy Folks today. It might not be the 2 studies that she had focused on, which were concerning because they did seem to show that some kids were getting worse. But we do need to get to the bottom of what that actually means, as I've already alluded to. And these studies of social emotional learning don't show that sort of iatrogenic, that sort of harm-creating effect. So that's, I think, worth thinking about. Educators need to be able to, I'm going to say develop, have the time and resourcing to develop students' social and emotional capabilities, able to get support to enable the most positive relationships they can with their students, because sometimes it just is too hard. Like, some students and some teachers get to a point where, not to say it's not salvageable, but they might need an outside hand. And I don't really know if a lot of schools have the capacity to, or the systems in place to know when that's happening for their teachers. Is anyone involved in school administration here? We got the hands. Okay. So I don't know if that's an unreasonable, like if there's some kind of Pollyanna, like, oh, wouldn't it be great? But come on, buddy, right? That's not possible. But if we could know that there's a teacher there who is dreading coming into school just because of that relationship with one student who's making their life a living hell, let's call it. It might be a bit dramatic to say it that way, but that would be good to know. And maybe there's a way for someone to intervene and to help develop that relationship or short circuit the problems that are coming up in that relationship. We tried to, when I was working with Donna Cross in Perth, Australia, one of the very first projects I worked with her on was with little kids. It was trying to prevent problems with childhood aggression and help teachers do things in their classroom that could deflect students who are showing problems regulating their aggression. And it was very hard to do that study, partly because one of the things we were working on was an idea that had come out of the guy who invented this research on teacher-child relationship, Robert Pianta from the University of Virginia, had this idea of banking time, this idea that, okay, you got a student in your classroom who's really difficult. What you need to do is find a way to spend time one-on-one with that student, doing things that the student's okay with, so that the student knows that you're someone with whom, there's another side to you, is what it's coming down to, that you're not just the person getting him or her in trouble all the time. And it was a lovely on-paper notion, I think. Okay, because you need to put positive experiences into the bank because later on you're going to have to draw from them. But in practice, it faced a lot of challenges, even just from teacher sort of beliefs, which was that it's not fair for me to give extra time to this, this student who's actually, there's all these lovely students who are really good who would love to have one-on-one time with me during my day. So it didn't seem fair to do that to the other students. And so I've already spoken to that a little bit. Okay, so I'd say we have this idea that we can provide educators with training in pro-social and authoritative classroom management, inculcating respect. There are ways to do that. There are very clear sort of guidelines around sequenced, active, focused, explicit approaches to social emotional learning in the classroom, and the studies that show that those sorts of approaches are happening show bigger effect sizes than where they aren't sequenced or they aren't active or focused or explicit. And I'm not going to get too into it. Embedding them in this whole school framework where everyone understands. And this works for bullying too. It's not just about mental health. I could say all the same things for bullying interventions. And whole school interventions are shown to be more effective in that area as well. And then making them appropriate to the age, but also to the cultural background, for instance, of the students. But there's a buy-in problem, right? And so I've already sort of alluded to that a little bit with this banking time example. Oh, I still have time. It's nice. Okay. And I don't want to create a straw man argument where it's like, well, okay, but really that's not how people are. But you do see these waves of like, no, we need to focus on reading and writing and arithmetic, somehow those are the 3 R's, right? And I think I'm certainly not the first one to say that we're missing the immense potential of schools if that's all the focus is. And I just want to do a little quick detour and a salute to Albert Bandura, the great Canadian psychologist. Most people don't know he's Canadian, I'm going to say. But anyway, Bandura, amongst other things, so you might know him from social learning theory, the Bobo doll punching the guy who had kids punching the... Anyway, if you don't, you don't. If you do, you do. But later on in his career, he got into a little bit more of like thinking about morality and how we operate as humans in the world. And this is sort of, it gets called moral disengagement theory, and a lot of his examples come from Nazi Germany, but they're in more subtle ways applicable all over the place. The question is, how do we do something that morally we ourselves might step back from and go, maybe that's not the best, but I'm acting this way anyway. And some of those things are things like moral justification, and I think that's embedded in anytime you've heard someone say, like, it's not the role of schools to do that, we're here to educate them. We're not here to, improve their mental health. And so that's a moral justification, and that allows us to see things happening and exonerate ourselves of distress or remorse or guilt or whatever. This is what the framework postulates it's for, so that we can't walk around thinking we're bad people. Most of us can't sit there thinking I'm a bad person, right? And so these processes. You have advantageous comparisons that get made, I've heard this with bullying. There's no bullying at my school. And it's like, right, okay, so you have no idea what's going on at your school. Okay, great. Or like compared to that school, we're doing a lot. And that may well be true. I'm not saying these things might not be true. I'm just saying that they might get in the way of buying into the idea that actually maybe social emotional learning is worth investing in. Or bullying interventions, the same. We could say the same thing. This slide was actually from a talk I gave around bullying. I've just tweaked it a little bit. And then there's, and the other things of displacing responsibility. It's not the job of teachers to teach kids how to behave or how to cope with life. It's the job of parents. And it's like, that's great. It is the job of parents too, but we know that not all parents are in a position to do that very well, and we're the last resort before they go out into the world. Schools are. And actually, the second one is just an example, again, of displacement, not diffusion of responsibility. And that was something that I should have changed and did, but anyway, okay. All right, so educators can make a difference if the school leaders and policymakers see the value. And so there are multiple papers out there looking at qualitative research often that's looking at teachers sort of like, do you or don't you engage in things like supporting the mental health of your students? And they almost always say, as a facilitator of doing that the school leadership is behind it and really supportive of it. And as a barrier that the school leadership is not, supporting it. So obviously, having support at that level is crucial. And the last slide, as much as anything, this last slide, as much as anything, is there to kind of go, we need the counter arguments if that's the belief that's the barrier. And so that's there for that reason. Teachers can't be expected to be therapists. If mental health professionals are funded or enabled to support struggling students, then educators can get on with their job. So if there are roles in place such that, okay, that child is really struggling, that they can get that support from the third party within the school system. Ideally, if the whole school approach is used so that everyone's on the same page, parents, teachers, leadership, that they're all talking, the students, that they're all talking the same language, and you're always going to have people who don't buy into it, who think it's a waste of time, but the evidence is there for that as well. And then I would say if relationships are prioritized as highly as the other 3 R's. So you've probably heard people talking about the 4 R's, or the 4th R, and that is to say the relationships, because it's just having that relationship. If a child doesn't have one solid relationship with an adult in their life, that's not at all good. And the teacher can be that person. They're just usually harder to get to that place with. So I would say collectively we need to demand a society, because it's up to us, I guess, to start, where this is, I'm going to pull up something that so Kathy Short, who is the Executive Director of School Mental Health Ontario, who are the implementation partners of the Ministry of Education, supporting all of the school districts there to implement multi-tiered systems of support for mental health. She likes to say, that was a mouthful, wasn't it? She likes to say, getting mental health into the school sort of setting as part of the priority isn't something else that you're putting on your plate. Mental health is the plate. Like if you don't have that as the foundation, you're not going to be able to pile the food of learning. This metaphor is going nowhere. The food of learning can't be stacked onto it. Like that's the foundational thing. And not everyone comes to school ready to do that. So this idea that child well-being and mental health isn't an extra thing that you need children to be doing, it's a fundamental thing that's going to undergird learning. Obviously, the workload issue is a huge problem, and it's bigger than probably anyone in this room to solve that, but we need to be demanding, from our elected members of our various houses of legislature and whatnot, that this is a priority. And parents are also an ally too. You're always going to have parents who, pull their kids out of school and homeschool them. I know friends who've pulled their kids out of school and homeschooled them just because, the child's, identifies as gay and feels like they're tormented at school and doesn't fit in, and it really wears them down, okay? But if that parent could be heard and, taken on as an ally, okay, that could be valuable. And expecting schools to serve the needs of every student and not just those who are on, on the honors lists at the end of their tenure at school. So those are the things that I think we can work toward. And those are the references for some of what I've been talking about, and I can provide more. And I thank you, and thanks Elizabeth and everyone at the university and school for bringing me over. Appreciate your time. All right.